have a constructive conversation in a larger context where even our congressional members are not very good role models for being productive. And I think that in a lot of ways, for that reason, whether it's Harvard or other states or other legislatures, they're constantly asking our commissioners, tell us how you do that. How do you recreate productive conversations again?
One thing that might be helpful for reporters is to be able to do profiles of commissioners that have served before. Is that something that you could help us with? Maybe send a list of names or suggest someone to interview?
Yes, absolutely. Perhaps we can work with Ethnic Media Services to find time to bring some of those commissioners on board. I'll say that this is the first time for LA County, and so there's going to be a lot of things that are first time, you know. But at the state level, we do have 14 commissioners who really represent the diversity of the state, and each one of them has a story that is so worth telling. Several of them do come from Los Angeles County. I'll highlight that the people who happen to be from Los Angeles County include, let's see, Chinese American, Mexican American, mixed Colombian and Afro-Caribbean American, African American. I may be missing some people, but they really represent some diverse backgrounds, and each of them came to provide this service for different reasons. But when you talk to them, you really realize how proud they are to represent their community, but also how good they are in listening to people's stories beyond their own.
Great. Okay, let me go back briefly to Ellen Asatrian. Ellen, what are some of the issues arising from lack of representation of the Armenian community?
I think access is the most critical, right? Access to services, access to programs, understanding of programs. I think when you don't have, and obviously allocation and of funds through the budget, because as we all know, you know, the Board of Supervisors carries a very heavy budget and has an opportunity to fund a lot of community projects and initiatives. And so, you know, first fold would be, you know, when we talk about access, you know, is the community actually aware, and is the outreach and education being conducted in such a manner that it serves the underserved communities? And that's been a continuous and ongoing issue for the Armenian American community, specifically, that has a lot of language barriers. And then within the community, there's also like twofold, where there's also Eastern and Western Armenian. And so, you know, when you don't have proper representation, when you don't have your elected official that understands your community and the diversity within each community, you don't have the programs put in place in a way that actually serves the community. So a perfect example of that would be, most recently, you know, there's a large social media campaign going for education on COVID-related matters, right? But there's a whole segment of the Armenian community that is not on social media, that they are watching Armenian television and they're reading Armenian newspapers. They are not on social media. So even if you had the graphics in Armenian, you are missing possibly the most vulnerable community if you are not tapping into placing ads and public service announcements and actually doing interviews on different Armenian television channels. So access and education, I would say, would be number one. And then number two is, it kind of goes in line with that, the community organizations being able to benefit from the programs and funding that's available, because somebody is getting it, right? And the funding is there. There are different organizations that are getting it, and making sure that funding is appropriated in such a manner that it represents the different communities and goes to the different communities.
Ellen, before we go to another question, what is the population of Armenians in LA County and statewide?
So again, this is where the census comes in. We talked about LA County having about 750,000 Armenians that live here. You will not see that being reflected in the census, and we're looking at over 1 million. I believe Arakash on correct me if I'm wrong, but over 1 million in the state of California. So you have a very heavy population within LA County and Southern California. So,
thank you so much. Sandy has a question.
Right. This has just been such a fascinating lesson for all of us who, honestly, the Redistricting Commission was sort of an abstraction, and you're making it so real. What I've noticed in our work on the census is how empowering it is for individual groups, and I'm thinking of Pacific Islanders, I'm thinking of Middle Easterners, I'm thinking of Nepalese and Bhutanese, newly settled as well as really isolated groups, to find a way to identify themselves and gain visibility for their communities. It seems as if the Redistricting Commission is a great opportunity to promote visibility for your community, even as you're saying it's also a way to connect your community to others. Could you perhaps speak about, I'm thinking of the 30,000 Indonesians in San Gabriel Valley. I'm thinking of the Samoan and Fijian and Tongan and Native Hawaiian populations of LA County. I'm thinking of the incredibly rapidly growing Nepalese. Could you speak a little about what you see as why it matters for them to apply? I could add the Cambodians, the Laos, the Mixtecos speakers, all of these small groups, and this remarkable opportunity to work truly in a diverse environment, but raise the visibility of your own populations.
Well,
go ahead.
Yeah, I would again emphasize that people bring to the commission a set of experiences and expertise that is not only specific to their communities, but one of the things that we look for the different commissioners to do is to actually understand and have an appreciation for the diversity of the entire county. So that's one thing that people who work with or represent a particular smaller group can help both demonstrate and advance in terms of their work on the commission. And that's why applying for the commission is important, because it also, applying for the commission asks you questions about things like, your appreciation for the county's diversity. And I think it just helps people think about these issues and consider the issues and think about both their own communities and the other communities they have to work with. People also have to demonstrate an ability to be impartial. And again, this is something about how do we make democracy in LA County work? So we believe the process for applying the commission is just a really good process to not only think about your community, but about how do we make Los Angeles County's democracy responsive to all.
I'll just add really quickly that when you come from a small population, a small language community, you oftentimes are someone who understands the importance, the heavy importance of listening and including voices that have not been heard before. A small story for the Filipino American community in 2001, when they came together to think about the importance of their community and where they're located and the historical traditions of how they both came here and the traditions that they continue to celebrate. And they told that story to the commission. It was so powerful. It was so powerful that some of the the state assembly members who were listening to it were crying. They had not heard this story before. Give another example, the Long Beach Cambodian community, which is currently in Long Beach city council split in half, have started to come together to say, what can we do to both serve on a local committee that Long Beach has just created, a Citizens Redistricting Commission, and also tell our story. And in the process of telling the story of how their community has grown, they not only feel heard, it is therapeutic from the perspective of rebuilding a community that has suffered from running from a very war-torn situation. So it's a process of building identity, but also finding a place here that is very healing. So I will just say that for commissioners who step forward, what we hope is that, especially if they come from smaller communities, that story of how they will respect and hear otherwise marginalized communities is so important. We had on the California Commission someone who was of Pacific Islander background, and he started every meeting with a big cry, "Talofa!" Right? And each time he would find another Pacific Island language to call out, because that language is those languages are so rarely heard. Samoan, Tongvan, Guamanian, Chamorro. And so he purposely used those languages as a way of greeting and also letting people know, I hear you. I start by listening.
Thank you, Kathy. You can hold up your sign if you want.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I hold this up. Some of the reporters were chatting me offline. I couldn't figure out how to put it into the chat, so I'm just writing it for you if you can see it. Okay. Chinese name is Hong Zhifu.
And Pilar, one last question from our wonderful Khmer TV, which would just, following up on Kathy's remarks about Cambodians, I think it's very important. Kathy, just summarize again what the requirements are for applying. Do you have to be a citizen? Do you have to be a voter? Just one more time. I know Monica gave us very good instructions, but redundancy and repetition is very helpful to us reporters.
Okay, Monica, forgive me if I get these things wrong. You do have to be a voter. And it's a hard thing because I know a lot of our communities are in the pathway to becoming citizens. But I think that they recognize that this job, for a variety of reasons, requires that you have a little bit of roots in Los Angeles County. You do have to have voted in, I believe, the last 2 out of 3 major election cycles. And so I think, Rosalind, you talked about that means that you have to have voted in 2018 or 20, something like that. And then you have to have stayed with the same partisan party designation. That could be major party like Democrat or Republican. It could be nonpartisan, no party, but you can't have changed in the last 5 years. And the idea behind that is that you're always a little bit worried that someone's coming in and sort of trying to be something that they're not. It's not that you can never change your partisan affiliation, but just that they were looking for people who were consistent. So basic requirements, that means if you have to be a voter, it also means that you've got to be at least 18 years old and a citizen registered to vote.
And Monica has just put in the chat the requirements for those of you who want to copy them from there, and also a link. Go ahead, Monica.
The caveat is you only have to have voted in one of the last 3 elections